Yo, 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 what is good, everyone? Welcome back to another weekly episode of the Vols ATB podcast. And man, we got a jam-packed one this week, bro. We're going to definitely recap the last hour. The SEC 2025 season schedule dropped just now. We got, the college football playoffs. We have our first round opponent. We're going to break down traveling to Columbus, Ohio on the 21st of December. And we're definitely going to jump into the Tennessee basketball team being the number one in men's basketball and number 19 in women's basketball. We got a jam-packed show. Drew, it's that time of year, man. Usually this time we're checked out on football, where we're just basketball, baseball. We're in the college football playoffs, man. And not only that, but we have the number one college basketball team as well. Man, the vibes are high right now in Knoxville.
The vibes are immaculate right now. I mean, you got a winning football team. Arguably, not even arguably, easily the best first-round matchup that you could possibly have, just from a brand perspective, like what it means, the ability to win that game. I think it's a very winnable game for Tennessee, and we'll obviously talk about that in the show later on. And, of course, man, the basketball team. The basketball team is playing at an all-time level. Even despite Miami not being the best of teams, Vols took control early in that game and never really looked back, and very convincing win, even despite being plagued with the injury bug. And so they got a big game against Illinois on Saturday, which we'll talk about near the end of our show. But yeah, I mean, the vibes are at an all-time high, Brando. Baseball national champs, men's basketball number one in the country. Lady Vols are still undefeated. Vols football in the playoff. You can't really ask for much more, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, last week we were, the ladies Vols game was kind of ending right there. They were playing FSU, that game where they kind of gave up that 18-point lead, and then now they knocked off number 17 Iowa, obviously without Caitlin Clark. But yeah, we've been talking about the men's sports. The Lady Vols and Kim Caldwell getting some resemblance going off right there. We're going to hop into some basketball later, but I guess go off the top of the hour news, Drew. The 2025 Tennessee football schedule was released, and yes, we are definitely focused on the playoffs right now. I've checked Vol Facebook. The complaints are in. Why are we worried about next year's schedule? We're in the playoffs, Drew. The schedule makers and the conference still have to do their job. But overall, man, it pretty much what we expected. That first game in Atlanta, playing Syracuse, opening up. That's a good kickoff game. ETSU, and then I think the biggest games that kind of stick out to everyone that kind of swapped around. Tennessee will host the Georgia Bulldogs in Week 3 in Neyland Stadium. And then you look down at Week 13, Tennessee will travel to the Swamp, going to Gainesville in late November. And I think that's the latest scheduled time the Vols have played Florida since 2001. That game had to be rescheduled. I was literally an infant. And then this is like the earliest we've hosted, I think, Georgia in quite some time. So it's really weird, but I don't know, man. I want to get your thoughts. For me personally, Georgia, I kind of like having them early because if Tennessee has that bad mojo, we don't have to have that mindset that the season's done. You have enough time to kind of rebrand your season for the college football playoffs. But at the same time, I mean, you're getting into that late season stretch where you're playing Oklahoma and Florida and Vanderbilt, who might be playing their best football in that stretch. So I don't know, man. What we saw from the SEC this year, on paper, it looks kind of promising, but we know this conference is getting better as we go. It's different. It's the same, but it's different.
Yeah, no, I mean, the things that obviously stand out to me is, obviously playing Georgia, the first SEC game of the season. Appreciate you, Brando, eating your dinner on the show.
Yeah, that's really bad.
Never failed to impress me one way or another. Let's just keep it at that. But no, I mean, all jokes aside, I mean, obviously that game standing out as the first game in conference play. I think that has to be the earliest we've played them since, I want to say 95. I think in 95 when Peyton was there, we played them in late September. And easily, the earliest we played them since they kind of like reconfigured the schedule a little bit 5 or 6 years ago. But I like it, honestly, because, they're going to have a brand new freshman quarterback, whether if that's Gunnar Stockton, or Jaden Rashada as well. A lot of people forget that, Rashada is actually at Georgia somehow. But, that might be a good situation where we've seen from Georgia in years past where they kind of struggle at the beginning of the season and then they really find that flow in October and November. I mean, it felt like every year when they play Kentucky, in September, they always struggled that first road SEC game. And this is a good opportunity for Tennessee. I mean, clearly, I think obviously you got to win this game, of course, but what the committee has shown this year is that they don't really necessarily care that much on how you perform in September. It's more of the fact on how you end the season in November. And being able to have that game out of the way already I think, is a huge positive for the Big Orange. Another thing that kind of stood out for me is that Tennessee lucked out again this year on not having consecutive games of Georgia and Alabama and Florida all within a 3 or 4 week stretch. It looks pretty favorable on paper. I mean, start off the schedule, conference play at Georgia, then you go to at Mississippi State, which is a very winnable game. Arkansas, obviously, that'll be a revenge game where, probably dark mode. Neyland's going to be rocking by far. And then you go to Alabama and Tuscaloosa, which is always a tough game. And then Kentucky and Oklahoma, and obviously the Swamp in November. And the Swamp in November might actually be pretty good, pretty favorable for Tennessee too, because we've seen that we've had so much struggle, not just in the Swamp, but especially in September. Being that first home game for the Gators, having that prime time. Them still being 100%, not really having that many injuries, and this could be a good opportunity for Tennessee. Where if Florida's, fingers crossed, plagued with the injury bug. Tennessee could be able to take advantage of that and get their first win in the Swamp in 22 years at that point next year. So I'm a big fan of the schedule. I think the expectation going in, even despite playing Syracuse, who I think a lot of people don't really realize, at least from our fan base, a good team, a 9-win team this year, potentially 10 if they win their bowl game, which is pretty remarkable for a first-year head coach. Yeah, beat Miami to stop them from being in the playoff. I think they win 10 games next year. I think the schedule is favorable for a 10-win season again, and who knows? With some of the pieces they may get in the portal with the interior offensive lineman, and obviously, D lineman and, potentially maybe another running back, they could scratch, 10 wins. Potentially even 11 as well. And so I'm excited for next season tremendously.
Yeah, I'm kind of, leaning where Tennessee has the potential to drop a game or two that they shouldn't. We obviously know that in the Heupel era, but we also know that Tennessee, with the schedule being different and kind of flipped around, it might be able to have Tennessee have that wake-up call if they do drop one early and do come out in the season. Me personally, I hope that you're right about the Florida game, because we've known that Billy Napier has fought to keep his job the last 2 seasons. He's going to return next year, it sounds like. They're all in on him, and DJ Lagaway is the quarterback down there. And we saw what has happened. A few times he has been knocked out of the games or whatever, having to start. Their quarterback from Yale that was just kind of sitting on the bench. Overall, though, they're recruiting at a really high level right now. They had a crazy signing day finish. I'm hearing they're probably going to do that in the portal as well, spending quite literally his buyout money on recruits, which is just kind of crazy to me. And they're gonna reload, man. So they're gonna be all in next year. Going down there and playing them. They had these huge wins against LSU and Ole Miss this year. So it's going to be interesting to see how and where that program is next year. Is Billy on his way out? Is he on the hot seat? And I promise you right now, I'll tell you right now, and we both know this, it's going to be a night game on ABC. It will be the ABC night game, and it'll be Tennessee versus Florida at like 7 p.m. in the Swamp. And I'm sure that Tennessee will probably be the same scenario now, on the outside looking in or controlling their own destiny to say, for this season. Going in the Swamp is going to be crazy, man. Especially in November, November 22nd, right before you close against Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. That's on my list. But I'm ecstatic about the Georgia week 3, man. If we can catch them early, like you said, they don't play their best ball. Nico, depending on how this season ends, what Tennessee does in the transfer portal in the trenches last year. Hey, little side note, there might be a Georgia Bulldog that might be on the Tennessee roster next year playing against Georgia. Who knows what happens in the transfer portal? So, I'm excited about it, man. This team, Tennessee, is it's going to be. There's guys that we don't even know about yet that is going to be on this Tennessee football team come next year. So, just all eyes on what Tennessee, how they finish this year and the portal next year. But I'm there with you, like a 8-4 floor, 11-1 ceiling, maybe even undefeated.
I'll be honest with you. If we go 8-4 next year, Heupel's seat should absolutely be scorching hot, because with the roster, with the talent that we have returning next season, given the fact that obviously you're going to have guys, and I won't mention any names, but you're going to have guys that are going to be asking for pay bumps and pay raises and things like that to return, or they'll go in the portal. Just assuming that we're able to get that taken care of, you're talking about you're returning such an experienced defensive line. outside of the fact that, James Pierce leaving for the draft, but, having Josephs and having Tyree West and, and all these guys, Jackson Moy as well. You got what, 12, 13 players in that defensive line this year that's played over 100 snaps. Like, that's going to be a massive advantage for us going into next year. And not to mention T. Lander and Arian Carter both being able to get such significant playing time in their first 2 years, where you usually see in that junior season, you take that big next step. And mostly everybody in the secondary is like pretty much returning as well. So there shouldn't really be an excuse. We got a college football playoff game next Saturday. We really shouldn't even be talking this much about 2025, but just in the grand scheme of things, unless disaster happens for Tennessee in the portal in the offseason, there is no reason to not think that Tennessee shouldn't be a 10-win, 11-win team next year. Like, they should be one of the top 3 teams, at worst, top 5 teams in the SEC, in my opinion. I might be wrong on that, but, just looking at it and expecting who's going to improve, who's going to be back, Nika should be taking that next step. A lot of the guys at wide receiver, like Mike Matthews, maybe even Staley as well, should be taking that next step. And Travis Smith, of course, who may potentially – dude's dog is freshman next year, and he may have the talent enough to be able to get significant playing time. So
Westlake wasn't that great, but Westlake wasn't that great, but his stats, like, everyone saw what he was doing on the field, and obviously it was like, in blowouts, having to come back down big leads. But he can't help the team he's playing on. The kid's an athlete; he's an absolute beast. So there ain't no telling. But I think I agree. You've already seen Tennessee throw some offers out there to the some offensive guards. The one from Arizona, the one from Northwestern. Don't have the names off the top of my head, but just look out for Tennessee to be extending those offers. And obviously Tennessee is going to be mainly focused on the college football playoffs right now. You'll probably see Josh Heupel and some offers roll out there late from the recruiting staff and stuff like that. But I think the main portal recruiting is going to be like, if you want to see what we're about at Tennessee, just turn on the college football playoffs on December 21st. Watch us against Ohio State, and if you win that game, man, it's a completely a huge momentum seeker, man, because you saw what recruiting happens. Those playoff teams that are in playoffs, they're usually at the top of the recruiting rankings and being able to reload for years to come. So, all eyes on that. But 2025 does look promising. But Drew, right now, we're in the college football playoffs. And, last week we pretty much were had it figured out that we're either going to go to Columbus or Happy Valley. We're going to be playing a Big Ten team. Tennessee is traveling on the road. They're going to Columbus, Ohio on the 21st. 8 p.m. kickoff against the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State coming off the loss to Michigan. They got to sit out their conference championship. Tennessee coming off the win against Vanderbilt, set out their conference championship. It's going to be all gas, no brakes. It's real life. It's getting real. And I'm interested, man, to see how it all breaks down. But College Game Day will be in town. Drew, Tennessee, Ohio State, how are you feeling about this matchup? I'm kind of feeling optimistic. I think how we saw Nico end the Vanderbilt game and how Josh Heupel and the Tennessee offense is, finding some success. I want to know how Ryan Day and Ohio State is going to be able to game plan for an offense they haven't seen any kind of shades of all year.
I think this team, and maybe out of all the teams that we've had under Josh Heupel by far, I think this team is the most built team ready for a December run for a national championship. And the reason why I say that is that we have a shutdown defense, right? A defensive line and front seven that can just put an enormous amount of pressure on a quarterback that has to play at a high level and, make the right reads and everything. We have lockdown secondary. McCoy should have been all first team SEC this year. And, Ricky Gibson has been so underrated and so good. And Boo Carter has made a lot of strides for a freshman. And Will Brooks might have been the best secondary, player that we've had all year this year. He's been exceptional.
And we would have never saw Will Brooks if Jordan Thomas didn't get injured early on.
Exactly.
Imagine how stacked that safety room could have been. We probably wouldn't even seen a lot of Boo Carter. And Boo was thrown out there, but hell, we could have had Jacoby Thomas and Will Brooks.
Exactly. And even guys like Andre Turntine have stepped up. There's a lot of guys that have took that next level this year. And the thing is that in 2022 with Hendon Hooker, and don't get me wrong, Hendon Hooker is one of my all-time favorite Vols, and one of the best quarterbacks that Tennessee's had in a very long time. But the thing that kind of plagued us in 22 was that we just had to outscore everybody and just hope for the best that we would get the ball last, or maybe our defense would be able to make a stop on one of those possessions and be able just to win a complete shootout. This team doesn't have to do that. Like we don't have to score 45 points to win a game. We could, I mean, we've seen it ourselves. I mean, like literally score 24 points, score 23. I mean, score 25.
We beat Alabama scoring 23.
Beat Florida, scored 23, Bama 24, Oklahoma 25. I mean, like that's not really huge amount of points. I mean, 2-3 years ago, if we'd score only mid-20s, we probably lost that game.
By 2 scores,
at least. And so I think like the thing that's so promising, and a lot of people could be like, oh, well, we struggled in the first quarter against Vanderbilt. I mean, we did. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think the nerves were a little bit too much just because of the stake of the game, and obviously that opening kickoff return probably shook everybody else up a little bit. But those last 3 quarters, if Tennessee can be able to play like that offensively and be able to convert on third down, Nico being comfortable in the pocket and using his feet, I don't know who can beat us. And I mean, that includes Oregon, that includes Penn State. I mean, I would even argue a rematch in Georgia on a neutral site. Tennessee would have, I think it'd be a pick 'em. I really do. And so seeing Vegas have us as 7.5-point dogs in this game, considering the fact, I mean, Ohio State couldn't do anything against Michigan. I mean, and Michigan's a top 10 defense, don't get me wrong, but Tennessee's like at the same range. I mean, Tennessee's top 10 defense too. And you've noticed with teams that they faced that were top 15, top 20 defenses throughout the year, they struggled offensively. I mean, they struggled to Penn State. They struggled to Nebraska. Nebraska's not even good, And this is an Ohio State team that struggles so much at the start of a game. Every game that they played this year, they've started off so slow. I think they've only scored a touchdown like maybe twice, maybe 2 or 3 times this year in the first quarter, and it takes them a quarter and a half to really get things going. And they got talented guys, don't get me wrong. Their wide receiver room is like
Cardell
Tate, Jeremiah Smith, a couple other guys as well, absolutely filled. Judkins and Henderson, that one-punch duo, running back is good. And Will Howard is talented. I think a lot of people get this misinterpretation or misconstrued on the idea that Will Howard is a statue in the pocket, and that's not necessarily the case. I mean, the man has 27 career rushing touchdowns, and he's a guy where, like in a lot of their red zone situations, that they rely on his legs and a lot of QB draws and option reads and things like that as well. And so, but I'm confident that Tim Banks, and this defensive staff can be able to get the right, type of, scheme to be able to shut down Ohio State offensively. Will really put pressure on him. And I think the thing is we have to utilize our 12 personnel for our 2 tight ends that we have and really take advantage of the fact that we have guys like Stays and Kitselman and even Ethan Davis as well in that depth position to be able to give an extra protection as well as be another option, down the field. And I think if Tennessee could be able to do that, they could absolutely win this game. And I mean, this could be a 27-20 or, a 24-17. I mean, I could absolutely see Tennessee hold this Ohio State team to under 20 points.
I would love to see us have that NC State kind of game plan where we did involve Stays and Kitselman, because Kitselman, he's had those flashes, where you've seen him at the goal line and jumbo, or you've had him on those 1 yard, those 1 yard catches. But I mean, I would love to see them in a more capacity thing, especially in the playoffs now. Like you said, though, the trenches, man, I think this defensive line, what we've seen from our defensive line and Rodney Garner all year, and Tim Banks' defense going against the offensive line of Ohio State, and how they kind of start off and how the battle is in the trenches. If we can get home on Will Howard and make him uncomfortable, I mean, he has like a lot of weapons, don't get me wrong. But I think our defensive line can stop their run game just based off their O-line play. And I think it's the point you pointed out is how Ohio State kind of starts slow. We've seen that so many times from us this year. And we kind of finally saw a glimpse of where Tennessee went down those 2 scores against Vanderbilt. And then after that, they were on fire, just firing on all cylinders. If Tennessee comes out how we know they do in the Josh Heupel offense, runs our script, gets going, and gets a few scores on the board early, I mean, you're talking about an Ohio State team that lost to Michigan playing from behind in their own stadium with, Ryan Day, a lot of question marks around him. Where do these players, their mindsets go? Do they ride behind their coach, or do they shut down? And I mean, we'll pretty much see it, come game time, what Ohio State's response is going to be. But I mean, I could easily see Tennessee being able to get up early and, trying to keep that lead for the rest of the game, how we've seen in game management, Drew, and it still being a 2-score game or a 1-score game. Or I can see Tennessee matching the Ohio State energy, like you said, and we're going into halftime. This would be like a 63 game off 3 field goals. Like, it could be ugly. It could be gross. It's going to be cold. For some reason, Ohio State fans in Columbus think that it doesn't get cold in Tennessee. I was golfing like 3 hours ago and got hit by a hailstorm in Hendersonville. Like, I mean, it's going to be, it's going to be what?
It snowed in Knoxville today.
Yeah, I mean, it's
this.
great.
I don't think Ohio State fans really realize, like, we're not the deep South. It's not Gainesville, Florida. It's not, we're not like Miami. It's not where it's just 80 degrees all the time. It gets cold here. I mean,
Really
we had
cold.
that storm. Knoxville had that storm last January where it was like 9 degrees for like 4 days straight, and it was like 6 feet of snow. And so this whole entire idea that, like, it doesn't get cold down here and it's different. There's a 5-degree difference. I mean, like, it doesn't matter if it's 20 degrees or if it's 30. It's like, it's all the same for a football player, and for anybody that plays outside.
We said it last week on the show last week. I was at that Vanderbilt game in Nashville. It was like 25 degrees at kickoff, wind going, no sun in sight. I mean, it's an 8 p.m. kickoff in Columbus, Ohio. It's prime time. I mean, who knows what the forecast is going to be like, wind chill, but I don't think it's going to, they got to go out there and play just like we got to go out there and play. And I mean, pretty much. Like, I think we'll be fine come game time, but it's whatever.
Well, I mean, they even had the media on the Selection Sunday, a few days ago when they were announcing the bracket. Well, like, they were talking to Heupel, like Herbstreit, they're like, oh, it's going to be really cold. And it's like, Heupel's like, it was 30 degrees at noon against Vanderbilt in Nashville. Like, like, it gets cold. Like, they practice in the mornings. It's cold as hell in the mornings. I mean, it's going to be 27 degrees tomorrow morning over here. Like, they're practicing in that.
Kirk Herbstreit turned into a Buckeye homer since his son committed there as a quarterback, and the Michigan alum. He's an OSU fanboy.
I think, like, the interesting thing is like what I've noticed, not just with Ohio State media, but like even the national media too, is that you're kind of getting this like idea that the media is kind of like writing us off. Like, they're kind of like, oh man, Ohio State, that rematch with Oregon, the Rose Bowl is going to be electric. There's going to be so much on the line. Like, is this going to be and it's like as if like they don't really think that Tennessee has a chance to win. And it's so funny too, because like when you look at it from the matchup perspective, they got a plague offensive line. Tennessee's pretty much 100% healthy on the defense line. So, that goes plus Tennessee, right? They have, they haven't faced a running back like Dylan Sampson all year, and Dylan Sampson guarantees at least 140 yards a game, at least 140 yards and a TD or 2 TDs. That goes towards Tennessee. Their secondary is kind of shaky a little bit, I mean, and I would say it's like a 50-50 matchup, and obviously they got to speed out wide receiver, even despite Tennessee having a talented secondary. But I mean, Will Howard has like struggled a little bit. I mean, he's only in his last 2 games, 3 touchdowns and 3 picks, and he only had 175 yards and 57% completion rate against Michigan with a TD and 2 picks, And so I this idea that like that they expect because it's a night game and Ohio State is going to be able to take care of business and there's too much on the line for Ryan Day. I hope that Heupel and this staff feeds that into the team and it pisses this team off, because like this team needs to feel disrespected. Like, they need to play with a chip on their shoulder and play with some swagger. And if they're able to do like that, how they did in the last 3 quarters against Vanderbilt, Tennessee's absolutely going to win this game.
Yeah, and I mean, I think defensively, man, the linebackers, I feel like Ohio State might, try to have that Georgia playbook where they target their tight ends and, try to open up the middle of the field. But I think, we've seen that on film, and I think Georgia kind of they kind of gave us a lot of help, like telling us what we were kind of doing wrong. And I think Tennessee's been able to go and fix that. You kind of saw it with the defensive line, then making adjustments with their footwork against that Vanderbilt game and their pressures. I'm, excited to see how Tim Banks lets loose. Does he go out there and does he show a lot of pressure? Or does he drop back and try to play the conservative defense? But yeah, man, I mean, I'm really, really excited. And I think Ricky Gibson and Jerron McCoy, they have a big test. A lot of them, both of those guys haven't got a lot of respect from the national media, especially Jerron McCoy those last few days on the All-American list. And I think those 2 guys have been at least one of the better SEC cornerback duos that we've seen. But I think it's the best wide receiver core that we've seen since Georgia. You got Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate. I mean, really, you go look at any backup at Ohio State at wide receiver under Brian Hartline, and you're going to see a couple 5-stars there that are just sitting there on the bench. So they got the playmakers, they got the talent, they've been able to recruit really, really, really well. But like you said, man, we've seen what's been happening We know the energy that the Michigan and Ohio State game holds, being the game, and I want to see how Ohio State comes out there and comes out there off a loss and the biggest game of their season. That's not a championship game or a conference championship game. It's going to be interesting to see, man. But I think Tennessee, I think Dylan Sampson is going to be able to have his way. You're going to obviously have your 25 carries from D Samp. He's going to get his 100 yards. But how does Nico take the top off? How does Dante Thornton and Chris Brazell manage in? Mike Matthews is growing in this offense. Obviously, we saw against Vanderbilt. Does Tennessee have the ability to take the top off? Because I don't know if you saw, but that one play across the middle to Dante Thornton where Mike Matthews set that block, he was wide open on the left side of the field. And it just takes Nico looking up once or twice and seeing that guy that is not used to being downfield just running wide open. And that's what we've been wanting all year is like we're so used to those guys running wide open. A few big chunk plays on offense, Dylan Sampson doing his thing, and Tennessee's defensive line being able to contain the running backs and Judkins and Henderson at Ohio State. I feel really confident if you're trying to force Will Howard to beat you. And that's just, I'm interested to see what the game plan is from Tim Banks.
I mean, they're going to absolutely shut down the run game. I don't think a lot of people realize because, well, again, I mean, Ohio State fans, for whatever reason, thinks the universe just centers around Columbus, Ohio. Like they just think that they're the greatest thing on earth, and it's quite comical.
900,000 of them.
Yeah. Do you know how many games this year where in the Big Ten, Quinshon Judkins was able to rush 100 yards? Just take a guess.
He was a big target from Ole Miss. Everyone was like, he's number one running back. I'm going to guess. I'll give him 1. You're going to tell me it's 0, though. It's 0?
It's 0. He, just to give you, we'll just break it down because we got plenty of time, actually. But so the most that he's rushed against, this season against a Big Ten team, 95 yards. 14 carries for 95 yards against Penn State. I'll give him credit where it's due. Like against Penn State, that is solid. I mean, now granted, it's not that great because we obviously saw what Oregon did to Penn State with the run game last weekend, and it looks like Penn State's rush defense is not necessarily the best either. But we'll just give it a quick little rundown. Michigan, 2 weeks ago, 12 carries, 46 yards, no touchdowns. Indiana, 14 carries, 36 yards, no touchdowns. Northwestern, 15 carries for 76 yards and 2 TDs. I mean, it's all right. Purdue, mind you. The same Purdue team that's like, I think they only won 1 game this year. 1 or 2. I think they may have won 2, but I'm pretty sure it was 1. 11 carries for 32 yards. Nebraska, 10 carries for 29 yards. Oregon, 11 carries for 23 yards. And he got a TD over there. He got 1 in the red zone. And then Iowa, 13 carries for 78 yards. And then Michigan State, 11 carries for 54 yards. He only had 2 games this year where he rushed for 100 yards or more this season. And those 2 games were Western Michigan and Marshall. So take that for what you will. But considering the fact that he had, 5 games in conference play where he rushed under 50 yards against Big Ten teams, is pretty downright terrible. And then when you look at people are like, well, they got Trayvon Henderson. Trayvon Henderson is like, their 1-2 punch. You want to know how many games Trayvon Henderson has rushed for 100 yards this year?
You're going to tell me it's 0.
You're correct. He didn't rush 100 yards for a single game this year. In fact, the most that he's rushed for against was ironically against Oregon, 87 yards on 10 carries. But 10 carries for 21 yards against Michigan, really, really impressive there. 8 carries for 65 yards against the powerhouse Akron. And 10 carries for 66 yards against Western Michigan. And 6 carries for 76 yards and 2 TDs. I'll give him credit where he got 2 TDs against 4 of his 6 touchdowns this year that he's rushed for have come from Western Michigan and Marshall. So,
dude, it's not even like they're not running the ball either. Like, y'all got to realize that Chip Kelly is the offensive coordinator there, and just because like they have that offensive minded thing that he ran at Oregon or whatever, like they're running the ball just like Heupel does in his system to open up the passing game. And you got these two 5-star running backs. The number 1 running back that left Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, got in his feelings about losing Quinshon Judkins, and I mean, their backfield is honestly better off losing Judkins, even though they didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah.
But overall, man, like I'm looking at guys like Dallin Hayden that OSU told to kick rocks, and I mean, you look at Judkins and Henderson; those are guys that should be performing better. And that doesn't mean that Tennessee should look lightly on them. Obviously, coming up to this matchup, obviously we got to shut down the run game. But these are guys that they're not the superstars. They're able to be stopped. Like they're not doing this against top talent. Now they're going against an SEC defense, arguably a Tennessee defense that has been slept on for most of the year just because of a couple a hiccup in Fayetteville and losing in Athens. Nick Saban and College Game Day, they've been trying to talk about this Tennessee defense, and I don't think a lot of the national media or teams around the world not in the SEC have really listened. And I'm interested to see how we match up against a Big Ten team, because we've seen it against Iowa, we've seen it against the Northwesterns and all the we went down the whole list in bowl games. We're in the college football playoffs. We're playing a Big Ten team in the playoffs. It's different, and what better way to do it than go into the freaking shoe?
Well, I mean, we're playing a top tier Big Ten team. I mean, there's no debating it. I mean, outside of Michigan, because Michigan is their daddy, of course. They are the biggest team in the Big Ten. Biggest team in the Big Ten by far. Program-wise, name, brand-wise, there's no doubt about it. But when I look at those rushing stats, man, I mean, and that's the thing. I've heard from so many Ohio State fans, not just Dan, and you know who Dan is.
Brandon. I love Dan. I've been thinking about him
quite well. Not just Dan, but several other people. Several other people are like, well, like when they play these, the reason why their stats are so down is because they're beating the hell out of everybody and they don't have to rush.
They're really not.
Well, guess what? Judkins had 13 carries against Akron. He had 14 against Marshall. In fact, every single game he had this year outside of Western Michigan, where he had 9 carries, he's rushed for double digits. And the same with Travion Henderson as well. So they're running the ball. I mean, it's not like they're running the ball only 10 times a game. They're running the ball with both of them together easily about 20 to 25 times a game. There's just no productivity for them. And so for me personally, as a fan, just looking at data and statistics and everything about this and what we know about this Tennessee defensive line and just that front seven in general, I would be furious, redneck angry, Powell pissed off, Maynardville mad. You call it, right? If we allow more than 100 rushing yards against Ohio State, and I don't think we will. I don't think they will. But if we allow over 100 rushing yards against Ohio State, we lose that game.
Oh, man, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you're a numbers guy because, numbers do matter. And, I mean, doing that against the Big Ten, they're going to come against one of the more prominent defensive lines in the SEC. And Rodney Garner, man, I can't imagine how Rodney Garner is coaching now in a postseason format, because we've seen him in, elite moments like this and huge games where his product showed up. It's the game where Rodney Garner can kind of staple his thing, man. This Tennessee defensive line of James Pierce can get home, the rotational guys being able to stay fresh. They're more worried about the weather, but I mean, they don't understand the depth that we have, I don't think. And Ohio State fans, they really don't know a lot about Tennessee. They're getting to know Vol Twitter really well. I've seen the little interactions, like Vol boy over there just demolishing and just being straight up toxic. It's gonna be crazy, man. It's gonna be real, and we're breaking it all down now. But for where we're at, I mean, honestly, they've been here a lot more than we have. But I know come game time, game week next week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, after we do the show next week, it's going to get real. We're going to feel like shitting ourselves, throwing up, just thinking about this, man. It's the most prominent, biggest stage we've seen Tennessee football on. Hell, even Tennessee athletics, a Tennessee football playoff game. I mean, it's up there. Obviously, it's behind a national championship and an eventual Final Four run if we get there. But yeah, man, it's one of the things we're going to be talking about for decades.
Yeah, I mean, this is the biggest Tennessee football game and easily since the 2001 SEC championship against LSU. I mean, had Tennessee won that game against LSU, of course, we would have wound up playing Miami in the national title game. And granted, we would have gotten our teeth kicked in by Miami, in my opinion. But, I mean, we would have had an opportunity to play for a national title nonetheless. I mean, this is absolutely there. And I think if you win this game, Heupel finally gets that monkey off his back where he can't win a big road game. Tennessee can't win big on the road. He gets that narrative off his back. And then you face an Oregon team where, somebody made a point where they claim that Oregon was the worst number one team that we have seen in the last 20 years. And at first, I was like, that's just borderline insane. I mean, they're undefeated, they're 13-0, all this stuff. And then you start looking at it, man. I mean, Dylan Gabriel, very good quarterback. I mean, there's no denying. Heisman contender, and rightfully so. I mean, he's been arguably the best quarterback in the country throughout the year. But then you look at their, rush offense. They're 53rd in the country in rushing offense. Barely averaging 170, a game. And you're talking about teams like Memphis and a couple others are ranked higher. And obviously Tennessee's top 10 rushing offense. Rushing defense and their defense as a whole. You watched that game against Penn State last weekend. There wasn't it wasn't impressive. And the thing is, man, is like I was talking about this with a buddy of mine today at work. Penn State was like slow. You know what I mean? Like they look just so much slower than Tennessee does. And so it's like if the fact that like they were able to move the ball down the field with ease and had Penn State now had such a horrendous first quarter, they might have won that game. They had an opportunity to win it with 2 minutes left, and so
they were dominating the trenches for real.
Yeah, and so Tennessee is like a very favorable matchup. And then if you manage to beat Oregon, they're going to the national title because they're not going to lose to Clemson or Arizona State. They may have to play Texas, but I don't see Texas beating Clemson personally. So this is a favorable road for Tennessee, and I'd much rather have us go through Oregon than as opposed to have to play Georgia again, in the semifinals. And so,
I mean, the only thing about that is like you're talking about, going out to Pasadena, and I think that's where the Oregon faithful, those guys, those Doug fans, they're psychos, man. Being on the West Coast, I think that'd be a really favorable travel for them, and then Tennessee fans having to go across the country on short notice because a lot of people aren't going to be able to put that deposit in for a Pasadena trip.
I don't know, man. I don't know. If you remember correctly, was it 7 years ago? Georgia played Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl in the college football playoff. And when you look at photos of that game, dude, it's like 65, 70% Georgia fans. And you're talking about Tennessee has the opportunity to play in the Rose Bowl for the first time in 80 years since like Bob Neyland was head coach, and playing against number one team Oregon, like in the granddaddy of them all. It might be at short notice, but I can tell you this: Tennessee could play a playoff game in the fucking moon, and we would probably still wind up having 10,000 people over there. There would be at least 40, 50,000 Tennessee fans, in my opinion, if we wound up playing in the Rose Bowl. I mean, hell, we might have 15 or 20 in Columbus, Yeah,
so. I mean, that's what it sounded like. And I mean, obviously, like a lot of us have, waited our entire lives for this. So I'm sure a lot of people will, take out a loan or two or open a credit line if they have to, just to be able to say they witnessed it, even if the funds aren't there. But yeah, I mean, going out to freaking Pasadena in the Rose Bowl, having a chance where Tennessee before this whole format, it was like a fantasy dream playing in the Rose Bowl. Would be like a crazy test. It was literally impossible, and now it is, which is just wild. But I mean, obviously, for that to happen, you gotta get past Ohio State first, and I think we've had a lot of help from the national media as well. A lot of people, like you said, penciling in Ohio State and Oregon. Having that rematch from earlier this year. But I mean, there's also just to talk about Tennessee and get Dylan Gabriel at Oregon, like the relationship with Heupel and Joey Halsey there, being on their staff, being recruited there, all the UCF connections. I mean, it's all been there. There was that McKenzie, Milton connection. He went back to UCF with Scott Frost. But I mean, just how people are sleeping on Tennessee, bro. Tennessee has a chance to, kind of go quietly into next week and kind of just shock the world. And I don't think a lot of people are memeing Ohio State for the flag planting incident, but I don't think really people that aren't Tennessee fans expect Tennessee to go in and win in Columbus just based off how we've kind of shit the bed in the past. But this is a different Tennessee football team, different leadership, different mindset. And like you said, Josh Heupel can go into Columbus and get that monkey off his back that's been known for Tennessee football and himself on the road and just go out there and make a statement, man. And Columbus, Ohio, I think that would be the final pillar to get Ryan Day out of there. But, I mean, who knows, man?
I don't know.
Who really knows? Coaching carousels is crazy.
His buyout's pretty bad. And, I mean, I don't know. Like, the thing is like, yeah, I mean, Daddy Michigan might be, whipping him left and right every single football season. But would they really sacrifice on firing a coach that guarantees them 10 to 11 wins every single year and take that risk. Because, I mean, for any coach, I mean, honestly, if you go in there and you're like, it doesn't matter if you win 10 games a year. It doesn't matter if you win 11 games a year. It doesn't matter if you make the college football playoff nearly every single season. You're going to get fired if you lose to Michigan. Who's going to take that? I mean, seriously, who's going to take that? I don't know who would, honestly. So I hope they do it. Well, apparently he's already took the North Carolina job. It's reported. So
Manny Diaz took the Temple job before taking the Miami job.
Yeah, well, I don't think Bill Belichick is going to be at UNC for very long, personally. This gives me Jim Mora vibes at UCLA all over again. So
isn't it crazy? Like you said, isn't it crazy that Ryan Day is like a playoff contender every single year? Trying to win a national championship, loses that one game, and there's fans in Columbus right now selling their season tickets to Tennessee fans because they want Ryan Day out of there. That's fucking crazy to me. Like the things that we would literally be on our knees praying for, that we'd probably be sucking hype off for bringing back to Tennessee. Pause. I like that, but worshiping the ground that he walks on, and like Ohio State, they're like, yeah, get him out of here. He's losing a freaking Dave Portnoy's money. Get him gone.
Well, like the only situation where I could see where like our fan base would be like, just Jesus Christ, just win this game is like if it was like, I wouldn't even say Alabama, right? Because it's been nice to beat Alabama the last couple of years. I'd say Florida, honestly. Like Florida's that game for us where it's just like every single year, just for whatever reason, like, even when we do win it, it's just way too damn close when it needs to be. But if there was a situation where we were 10-2 every single year, but then one of those losses were Florida, I don't know how this fan base would be. I mean, they kind of ran, Fulmer out of town because of that, and that's not to say Fulmer didn't do several other things that led him to get fired. But, I mean, that was one of the main things is like he couldn't beat Florida. He couldn't beat the main rivals. He beat Alabama a bunch of times, but, Florida was the team to beat, and he couldn't do it. And so, but I think the expectations that they have over there up in Columbus are just downright insane, personally. If you're able to finish second place in your conference every single year and make the college football playoff and get top 3 recruiting classes, I don't see how you would not be happy with it. But you got to remember, though, this is a school that's never really struggled that much. Even their worst years that they had in the 90s, they were still going like 9-3 every single year. So maybe this would be a good wake-up call for them. Fingers crossed would beat their ass next Saturday. They fire Ryan Day, and then they get like a Butch Jones loser, and they have to go through the trails of misery for the next 15 years. I really hope it for that school.
I'll never forget 2022 being at Florida and Neyland Stadium with you. We were at G10, and your friend Dan that we've mentioned was literally there in Ohio State overalls, and one of the biggest rivalry games in Tennessee history, and probably at that time the biggest game in Josh Heupel's career. I've been thinking about Dan. I've been thinking about the comments he made to my family about how I was very intoxicated on that day, and I'll be going up to Columbus, Ohio this Friday after I get off, the work, going in there Friday night, preparing for Saturday night, and it's gonna be a chilly one, but nothing that we're not used to here in Tennessee. But man, all hands on deck. It sounds like a lot of people are planning to invade, Columbus, Ohio through the secondary market already. Like Ohio State fans, just throwing their tickets up there on secondary markets. Honestly, cheaper prices than Tennessee fans are used to, paying in Neyland Stadium and away games in Nashville. So for Ohio State fans they're trying to rack up on some money or whatever, but I don't think they realize they're kind of doing us a favor considering what the market has been like in Knoxville the last few years. So
you're talking about the last 2 years. I mean, for games like outside of Vanderbilt and like the FCS opponents that we play, you're talking about for every SEC home game, it's at least $200, $300 a ticket. And I'm looking now. I looked on Vivid Seats. Right before our show. Tickets are now down for Ohio State, Tennessee in the shoe, under $200 now. They're at $190. At $190. You're talking about this was reverse. If this was a game in Neyland, it'd be $1,000 a ticket at least.
Exactly.
At least. And so I expect the ticket prices even to continue to fall down. I think even going closer into game day next Saturday, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if tickets wind up being $100 a piece.
There's a lot of us, a lot of us that are holding out.
Of that, I'm going. So
yeah, well, yeah, a lot of us that are holding out, like I was about to say that luckily I was able to, get a set of tickets from someone that was an Ohio State season ticket holder that is out on Ryan Day. Got him for a cheap price right there around, the 100, 150 market. But I mean, honestly, like you said, if you just wait it out, like a lot of the Tennessee fans are probably thinking about the ticket prices and the travel prices of driving up there. I mean, if you let it drop on Thursday to, under $100 a ticket, your hotel room's looking a lot cheaper, 30, 45 minutes outside of Columbus, wherever you got to end up staying before you make that drive back. And then, then you're able to budget that trip. And I think a lot of Tennessee fans, like I said, that's a lot less than, going locally in Knoxville or, driving a couple hours to Knoxville in the state of Tennessee, and you're getting a road trip out of it. And you're seeing Tennessee in the biggest game in college football since 2001, like Drew said it when I was literally in that thing. Like, this is the biggest game of a lot of our lives, bro. Like, a lot of our generation, they talk about the good old days way back. They talk about 98. It feels like 98. We meme that it feels like 22. Tennessee's in the playoffs. Like, we are here. And it's going to be a late night game. It's going to be a rowdy environment. But, man, we can make this like 2022 LSU. And even though that was a noon game, we can make it, imagine if we brought that energy to the night game and we have a couple things that do go our way early in this game, like they did in 2022 in Baton Rouge, Drew. We saw the energy, how it shifted immediately. And I mean, like you said, you go out there and get a punch or one or two punches early against an Ohio State team that's been, struggling off the rip. I mean, there's some positive signs for the Vols to take advantage of.
I mean, I expect it to be a crazy atmosphere, and I expect it to be loud. It's not going to be loud as Neyland, and their fans could say otherwise. But the way that stadium is designed, it will never be as loud as Neyland Stadium. Especially considering like the end zone, the seating is like at least 10 or 15 yards behind the end zones. But this is a perfect opportunity for Tennessee where we could be able to really start red hot offensively, open the floodgates in the first quarter, and leave them kind of shell shocked, and then like just fingers crossed that they don't figure it out on offense. And I think our defense is going to do enough to win this game. And obviously, we'll have way more to break it down next Wednesday on our show, but when it is game week. But I mean, this is a good opportunity. I mean, this is where legends are made, and Nico and Josh Heupel have a brilliant opportunity to be able to put themselves in that legendary status. If Nico's able to find a way to be able to get a road win against Ohio State in the college football playoff, even regardless what happens in that semifinal, you can't help but think, it'd be semifinal or quarterfinal? I think it'd be quarterfinal. Even if quarterfinal, because Oregon's the second round. So, yeah. But even then, if you're able to find a way, win that first round against Ohio State, and even if you lose the Rose Bowl against Oregon, I mean, you put yourself in legendary status of like Peyton Manning, Condor Holloway, Heath Schuler, T. Martin, like those guys, in my opinion. As a freshman, being able to do that, beat Alabama and Florida, and, potentially a playoff game against Ohio State in your first year as a starter, I mean, you can't write it that much better outside of winning the national title. So this is a great opportunity. This is a game that like I don't think a lot of people expect Tennessee to win outside of our own fan base and maybe media members that are a little bit more in depth with the game and both the teams and how they look. But and it's going to be a primetime game. I mean, it seems like every game we've had this year is an 8 p.m. kickoff. So, it's just going to be another one of those. But, I mean, I'm excited, man. I really am. So it's going to be electric.
I think before the season started, we thought that, Nico was going to be the $8 million guy. We didn't really have the learning curves in mind or whatever. And we've kind of seen over the year this season how he's adjusted and how he's improved and how he's made plays. And Josh Heupel, kind of taking the cuffs off him and, opening up more and more in the communication, how better it's gotten. I mean, I know this weekend, probably, going into next week, you got to let them loose. You got to go all hands on deck. Just go out there and play. They've been talking about it the last few weeks, how they, this was the end goal. They know, they have to throw it out on the line. They have to be locked in. They have to make plays. They have to take chances. They have to take risks. And you're going to probably see that Josh Heupel factor of, where they go for those big chunk plays and try to have those flashy plays to, to make the breaks and try to extend a huge lead, like you said, where they can have those explosive plays. I just want to see this team, go out there and be relentless, locked in, and, go out there and just shock the world. I want to see how our defense is well rested, having those weeks off. And, yeah, it's a huge game, man. It's going to be a big one. We'll be having a huge discussion next week. I'm sure, we'll have some basketball next week, but our whole show next week is going to be talking about the college football playoffs. It's going to be crazy. And like I said, a couple minutes ago, when it comes to next week, man, it's going to be setting in. It's going to be getting real every single day. You're going to be getting sicker and sicker knowing that we're going to have to watch 3.5 hours or however long of coverage in a night game with the whole entire world watching worldwide of Tennessee in the college football playoffs. So it's getting real, man. But I mean, it's Tennessee is at the precipice. We talk about, the college athletics, and, it's can't be better than being a Tennessee fan, man. And it goes both ways, because not only is Tennessee football doing their thing, but, Tennessee basketball just absolutely going on a tear, Drew. Just number one pin palm defense right now, number one in the country via AP poll. The offense is absolutely flashing. A big game in New York against Miami yesterday, another big W. Obviously, the number one ranking was a big thing, and I think it's going to be able to benefit Tennessee, being able to know that the target is on our back and we want to be who we want to be, like Rick Barnes said. But, man, being able to go out there and get the W against Miami, it wasn't pretty. We've known these neutral site games, man. The offense just for some reason vanishes, or there's new basketball introduced, or there's some kind of difference that Tennessee is not used to all season. But they come out with the win. They go into New York, big win against Miami and the Hurricanes. And, yeah, man, number one team in college basketball right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're playing at an exceptional level. 13-point win over the Hurricanes last night. Granted, Miami's 3-7. They're not as good as the Final Four team was a couple of years ago that they had, but still an ACC team, still on national television. Leaves the Vols at 9-0 currently. The other thing that's continues stood out to me is, man, Igor Milicic just continues to get better and better every single game. Another game where he hits double figures in points. This time with 16. Was second in the team with points, obviously next to Chaz Lanier. Of course, he dropped a very casual 22 points, going 4 for 7 from the 3-point line. Yeah. I said it earlier last night on Twitter, or X now, man, he might be the best 3-point shooter I've seen in Tennessee since Chris Lofton. I mean, the way that he's just able, as soon as he sets his feet, as soon as he even gets half a second, even a few inches open, he's so confident with the ball. And Connect was great. Don't get me wrong. Dalton Connect was a great 3-point shooter. But he was obviously a little bit more of a better all-around basketball player than Chaz Lanier is. But Chaz Lanier is exceptional. And the offense hasn't skipped a beat since Connect's left, with Lanier, picking up the pace. And then Meshack, did pretty well as well. He nailed the three-pointer. 7 points, had 5 rebounds as well. And the one thing that really stood out to me with this team, is that the team has been plagued with injuries so early this year. Estrella's out for the season with a foot surgery. Cameron Carr dealing with a hand issue, I think he has like a thumb injury or something like that on his right hand. And Darlington Dubar, was out yesterday after concussion. And even despite the fact that we had 2 guys off the bench injured, not able to play, and realistically, Cameron Carr's not going to be able to play until January. And hopefully Dubar will be all right enough to play on Saturday. Even despite the fact that we only had 2 guys off the bench, scholarship players, mind you, got significant minutes. Cade Phillips continues to impress me, man. He was one of those guys that started the year where I was like, I don't know if he's not good enough for this level. It just seems like he's a little slow. I mean, he's picked it up tremendously. 2 for 4 from the field, defensive rebound, assist, and a steal, and with 9 points. And then Jordan Gainey continued to, really play well off the bench, hitting 2 for 5 from the 3-point line, 8 points total, 5 rebounds, and 2 blocks, surprisingly, too. Had a very great game defensively. And the thing is, for me, is that even despite the fact that Meshack only had 7 points and Okpara didn't even score last night,
crazy,
we're still able to get 75 points, which is pretty insane. And so seeing Zakai being able to play at an exceptional level with 9 assists, nearly got a double-double last night. And, even Igor had a couple assists along with Meshack. And seeing this team just to be able to distribute the basketball, play at a high level, get the offense flowing, and just being ruthless defensively is exciting to see. So I'm very excited about this team. There was a little stat that came out on Tuesday saying that basically over the last 20 years, teams that are in the top 12 in week 6 in the college basketball season, one of those 12 teams has won the national championship. And so obviously Tennessee, along with Auburn and Kentucky and Florida and Alabama, the SEC schedule is going to be an absolute gauntlet this year. Tennessee's in that conversation, man. And when you look at what national title caliber teams do, they're able to score, they're able to distribute, they're not heavily reliant on one player. They're able to play exceptional defense, and I think the team has that identity. Obviously, we're going to have to see some improvement from Akpara on the offensive side of the ball, and we're going to need to have some depth with Dubar coming back, and hopefully Cameron Carr, both of them can stay healthy for the majority of conference play. But having said that, this team is really, really good, man. I'm incredibly excited about SEC play coming up next month. We start off with, Arkansas on January 4th, I believe. January 4th and January 6th. On that first weekend. And then on Saturday, we actually go to Champaign and play the Fighting Illini, who just came off a big win over Wisconsin last night, who was also a top 25 team. So a really good road test for them come Saturday, obviously on Fox as well.
Yeah, man. I mean, going into the season, I thought the defense would be there because of Rick Barnes. Defense always has been a thing under Rick Barnes, but to have this much success offensively, in my opinion, like this, I didn't know where we would be, without Dalton Knecht and what Chazanier would be and how Igor would able to be a 6'10" 3-point merchant. Like, it's absolutely crazy. But to talk about the depth that Tennessee has, and obviously not even being healthy right now, Drew, only 2 scholarship players on the bench. And, Cade Phillips, he was so raw to start the season off. He's improving, getting a lot of minutes that are going to be critical down the line. And Jordan Gainey, being able to be that sharpshooter that his comfortability in year 2 in the Rick Barnes system. Excited for him and what he can be this year. But yeah, man, Chazanier is still doing his thing, just making it look effortless. There's one motion, it's just clean. You don't have to think twice about his 3-point shooting. And I think it'll come for Akpara, man. He has his 1 or 2 blocks a game that he's given us defensively. He might have that goaltend, but I think overall Tennessee is better there defensively. And if he can even put it on the board, he's not going to have a lot of games where he's going to have that 0 on his stat sheet. He's going to be able to contribute something offensively. So a huge sign there. And obviously Tennessee didn't win big. It wasn't a great Miami team, but you're going in a neutral site game where you're just playing straight up ball. Not a lot of fans from either team. You're playing in New York, got the W, and then you can come back and adjust. A big game against Illinois, playing the SEC play coming up against Arkansas, who's obviously looking pretty decent under Calipari year 1.
Yeah.
Everything looked good, man. Excited about where this team is. I didn't think we would have this much depth going into this season, but to be able to have this depth now, and you still got Cameron Carr on his way back, and you're obviously down JP, but being able to have how Phillips and Dubar have stepped in and been really physical down low, and even Meshack, man. Meshack is just we're so spoiled with his defensive presence, but overall, man, I'm excited for where this team is. Being number 1, you're gonna have that target on your back, and if you can go out there and take care of business in Illinois on the road this week. That's a big W, man, before conference play. I mean, this team is playing, really good basketball right now. And to be able to find a way to win like that in New York was, we haven't seen that in past years where Tennessee, they're capable of dropping that kind of game. So that was a good, good W. And now you got to get back on track and what you're used to doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, and the thing is, the one thing I felt like that was missing from last year's team is that, obviously, it'd be nice to have 4 or 5 guys be able to come off the bench and, and be able to have that type of depth. And I wouldn't say Tennessee has the depth, has tremendous depth or anything like that. They have a tremendous starting 5, but then the difference though is that you have those 2 guys that you can be able to rely on coming off the bench and giving you anywhere between 6 to 12 points apiece. Yeah. And that was what was missing last year.
Your super seniors, but
I couldn't tell you how many times, man, where it felt like last year is you had Triple J coming off the bench or Santee coming off the bench and just completely non-existent, and the same with Awaka, it'd be nice to have another physical post player. It'd be nice to have Awaka, but the big issue that Awaka had last year was the fact that he couldn't stop fucking fouling.
Yeah,
it felt like he was a foul machine.
Minutes, yeah.
And so and that's the other thing I've noticed as well. It's Cade Phillips isn't really necessarily like that. He's a physical post player, and he might be a little bit undersized at 6'8", 6'9", but I'll tell you what, great defense, great defensive player. He is a threat on offense. I mean, he is a go-to when it comes to the alley-oops, and he's able to get himself
Dude,
open.
That was clean.
I mean, it's every game now. He's able to do it.
He's going back door, making it look easy.
Exactly.
He's a big guy.
He is a big dude. I mean, he's a big guy. I mean, but There's a lot of exciting pieces and things that are with this basketball team, and obviously Illinois, Big Ten team, not necessarily the talent that they had last year. They missed several starters from last season, transferred out, going to other schools, but it's still a mid-tier Big Ten basketball team on the road. The exciting thing about this, with us being number one, is that we're going to get everybody's best shot, and we're really going to be able to see what this team is truly made of. And this is a really good test before we end the non-conference schedule with 3 guaranteed wins essentially before going into conference play. And I'll tell you what, man, the other thing is for me, before we wrap this show up, is that I'm looking at the SEC standings right now, just based on like what the overall record is. You want to know who's the worst record this year for an SEC team? Out of the 16 teams, overall record, just 9-10 games. Just give a rough idea on what do you think the worst record is.
Out of 9 or 10 games, is it which team? Or
not
what the
which
record
team,
is?
just the record is.
2-8. Is it Mississippi State?
Close. South Carolina is statistically the worst team right now in the SEC at 6-3.
Oh. Okay.
And then you have, ironically, Alabama and Texas both tied to second for last at 7-2. And everybody else is either 8-2, which is Arkansas and A&M. You have several teams that are 9-1 and 8-1, including Vanderbilt, Auburn, Georgia, Kentucky, LSU, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Missouri. Granted, I mean, obviously, some of those teams have not played that great competition non-conference, but you're talking about a Missouri team that beat Kansas. That was the number 1 team in the country last week. You're talking about Auburn. Auburn's had some high-quality wins. They're a very good basketball team. Kentucky beat Gonzaga, and Kentucky and Duke. Yeah. And Ole Miss beat, convincingly Louisville a couple weeks ago. And Mississippi State beat Pitt. Pitt was a top 25 team as well. And Vanderbilt's 9-1. And so that's the crazy thing.
Vanderbilt's playing good ball. The one loss they have is in that championship game against Drake, where they just got caught off guard or whatever. But Vanderbilt, like that new system looks pretty promising. It's really
and that's the thing is like I could legitimately see this year for the SEC see 11 or 12 teams make the NCAA tournament this year. I mean that's how deep the SEC is this year, which is hard to believe for basketball, but it is at that level. And so there's not any guaranteed wins like in this schedule. And so like the only thing that I would say before we end the show when it comes to our fan base is that like if we drop 3 or 4 games in conference play, please do not melt down. Like this is absolutely expected. Especially when you consider that we have a stretch where we play at Vanderbilt, top 25 Mississippi State, at number 2 Auburn, top 5 Kentucky, Florida, Missouri, at Oklahoma, at Kentucky, Vanderbilt, at Texas A&M for 4.5 weeks straight. We're playing several top 25 teams. Even myself agrees with this take. So the SEC is going to be an absolute gauntlet of a schedule. I'm so glad I got season tickets for basketball this year because there's going to be so many fun games to go to and see a lot of great basketball teams as well. But man, I mean, this team's going to drop a game eventually, but this is a very, very good basketball team, and this team has the DNA to be able not only win back-to-back SEC regular season championships, but to make another March Madness run as well.
I think it would not be crazy to think that it's going to be like SEC football where the conference just beats up on itself and the conference records look really, really ugly. And there's some teams that have a few losses, but those losses are going to come from conference play because the SEC is so good at men's sports and major sports now because of the NIL and everyone's just trying to win. I mean, you're seeing new coaches left and right, new systems. Todd Downing at Florida, Vanderbilt hiring their coach from James Madison. I mean, everyone's trying to win. Everyone wants to have a winning culture in all the major sports, and we're going to see that come March. Like you said, there's going to be 12 teams that are in March Madness or going late in the SEC tournament championship, and it's just going to be crazy to see because those guys that do have that first round, knockout are going to be dangerous teams in the main, March Madness tournament. I think the SEC is going to be stacked, and just because they have, the dark horses are going to be able to be really dangerous. So excited to see how it stacks up. The conference play is going to be really, really crazy, and I agree with you, man. It's not crazy to think that we could drop 1 or 2, but to be able to have this kind of competition before you get into that crazy stretch of going into March, I think it's going to benefit Tennessee in basketball how it has in football. and it's all hands on deck. But man, we're getting to that stretch of play where you win those big games, you get ready for conference play, and you go down there and you have that stretch. But if you drop one, you know what the big picture is. You're not going to ruin your chances of going to March. But you get your lessons and you learn game by game, and it's going to be a stacked season, man. And the SEC is stacked in basketball, football, baseball. Big tests open up against Arkansas and former Vol Jonas Adu coming soon.
Yeah.
So.
No, absolutely. I mean, this team has everything to be able to make a deep run, as I said. But I mean, honestly, this might be a year, as you mentioned, like you're going to have ugly conference records. It would not surprise me in the slightest if an SEC champion has 4 losses this year.
Yeah.
In conference play. It's absolutely doable, especially with the amount of top quality opponents that you're going to have to face. I think we have 9 teams right now in the top 25, which is hard to believe, and so
I believe
over half the conference.
It'll be like football where it's like 4 or 5 basketball games left in conference play, and there's going to be some kind of crazy tiebreaker where in like football a lot of teams are 10-2 or 9-3, and a lot of basketball teams are going to be fighting for that last loss. I could see Tennessee, Auburn, Alabama, Kentucky being those 4 teams just kind of swapping back and forth, and seeing who comes out on top for the regular season championship. But like you said, man, really good competition. Going to be a lot of good games to see in TBA. Excited to get out to TBA for a few games this year that are affordable. And then, like I said, bro, going on the road, I got to get my get back and some good basketball to see this year. And obviously we're going to enjoy this playoff run in football. But Tennessee basketball, the number 1 team, a huge reload to go from football to basketball to baseball, like we've been so accustomed to, of just like straight energy, nonstop action. But man, it doesn't get any better than this, Drew. It really doesn't. And it's crazy, man. We're gonna be talking about 2 Big Ten matchups in 2 different sports, and hopefully we can get 2 W's. I mean,
absolutely. Brando, you got any final thoughts? Hit over the hour mark, surprisingly, but
not really. Last week we were struggling, freaking out about David Sanders. He signed with the Vols. Tennessee secured their top 10 class. Tennessee's going to play a college football playoff game on the road. Men's basketball is number 1. Kim Caldwell is out here, putting up hundos left and right, offensive juggernaut, while pregnant, by the way, just coaching her ass off. So, to see that energy in the women's basketball program is back, absolutely crazy, exciting to see. And obviously a lot of good basketball coming for the Lady Vols, who are now finally ranked, have some respect from the national media. But yeah, man, I mean, overall, Tennessee athletics is just it's going up there, man. You don't just come onto a show and talk one thing. Danny White said it. We're in everything school. We're breaking down everything, which is crazy because it makes this hour fly by like crazy. But yeah, man, next week it's go time. Like we said, we're gonna be shitting ourselves, freaking out, but we'll be here breaking it all down for another extra hour. College football playoff bound, first round. We have a Friday night game next week, and then we're the sole Saturday game, I think, right? Or how does that work? I think we're the one game at night.
For the college football playoff. Yeah, we're the only night game on Saturday. There's a Friday night game, which is Indiana versus Notre Dame. A little bit interesting matchup. Surprisingly, with both those teams being in the state of Indiana, of course, they hardly ever play each other. It's like the first time they play each other in over 60 years. And then you got SMU Penn State at noon, which is going to be another. I'd put that game on upset watch, by the way. SMU's pretty good. And then you got Clemson, Texas, another upset watch game at 3 o'clock, 3:30 or 4 o'clock, one or the other. And then obviously Vols, Buckeyes, 8 p.m., ABC, College Game Day. The entire world will be watching that game. So
yeah. College Game Day, the whole call. We'll have the whole breakdown, the Kirk Herbstreit, Pat McAfee, all that. It's going to be crazy, man. The energy's going to be up there. Obviously, we're used to playing primetime this year, but having that College Game Day and then leading on into it, going to try to get out there and see it in person, man, see what Columbus is all about, because I think that Vol Nation's going to invade, and I hope to see a lot of beautiful orange next Saturday in Columbus. But yeah, man, next week's episode, all college football playoff, breaking it all down. We'll be here to freak out and have anxiety attacks with you. But man, we're approaching the glory days, and we're living in the glory days. And sometimes, Drew, instead of freaking out and wondering where it goes wrong, you just got to sit back and enjoy it. Sit back and enjoy it, because obviously I say that and I'm going to be freaking out in my group chats and texting you about, oh my God, I'm going to throw up. But at the same time, I'm just happy to be here. We witnessed the worst. It's kind of like that SEC Shorts video of the Pruitt, Butch Jones, and Dooley years, and then throwing the trash can and blowing it up and getting past all that. And I feel like we exercise those demons, man. And Tennessee athletics as a whole, just in a beautiful spot. So cheers to that. Happy to be here, and let's go take another step next week. So
exactly.
But yeah, man, we'll be here next Wednesday, breaking it all down. Now my computer wants to act really slow, but until next time, good night, go Vols, and we'll be back. Thumbs up. Yeah. GVO, man.